Hello, and welcome to Allegedly Astrology. Each week, we break down the astrology that happened during some of the biggest scandals and events in history.
Yes, and thank you guys so much for listening. If you want to support us even more, you can leave a 5-star review and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you listen on.
And if you're new here, you should know that if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and DM us a screenshot of that review, we'll make you a custom meme of your big three and send you a quick write-up about it. They're awesome. They're funny. You should do it.
And we also have cool Allegedly Astrology stuff over on TeePublic, so head there if you want to check it out.
And as always, follow us all over social media. We're Allegedly Astrology on Instagram, Reddit, Hey Hero, and TikTok, and Allegedly Astro on Twitter. Visit our website. You could see transcripts there. You could see some charts. You could learn about us. You could book a reading with Dana.
So let's get into today's topic. Dana, what are we covering?
Today we're talking about Hillsong Church.
Ooh, yes, Hillsong Church. And that is a megachurch that's part evangelical, part Australian, part Grammy-winning music group, part wannabe hype beast. So a lot of hyphens there with this church. But the church is known as one of the most influential mega churches in America, and its pastors skyrocketed in popularity thanks to Justin Bieber and other famous celeb parishioners. However, lately, the church has been facing a real PR nightmare thanks to the countless scandals and now even a Discovery Plus docuseries spilling all the tea. It's 3 parts. It's called Hillsong, a megachurch exposed. So before we learn about the church's astrology, let's hear how it all began.
I love a 3-part series exposing a megachurch. But Hillsong is described by some as Australia's greatest cultural export.
It's pretty sad.
I know. This weird church, but it has 100. Well, also, I guess that's like, you know how people are like, well, one of my friends is from New Zealand and she has like a hard bias against Australians. And I know the thing about Australia is people say like, did you know it's just a country made of prisoners?
Yeah, that's like a jail nation.
Yeah, so maybe this is its greatest cultural export. Sorry to our Australian listeners because we do have some. Forgive me.
Also, prisoners are cool.
So anyway, Hillsong has 131 churches in 30 countries, 150. I think it's probably, I said just only 150, but I think it's like 150,000 or million weekly congregants and over 3 billion YouTube views. It was founded by this guy, Brian Houston, and his wife, Bobby. Brian was the senior global pastor at Hillsong, but he stepped aside for the time being, which we'll get to later. He's part New Zealander, part Australian. And, you know, he had a few siblings. They all grew up super Pentecostal, and his parents were even pastors themselves.
And if you're not familiar with what Pentecostal is, Pentecostalism is a type of Christianity that believes you have to have a very intense, transformative experience with the Holy Spirit. And there's a lot of speaking in tongues, a lot of accepting Jesus as your personal savior. And they believe the Bible is completely true and everything written is exactly as it happened. End of story.
Yes. Also, I just remember, well, Catholic time, Pentecost. It's like that one day where, like, didn't the Holy Spirit come and, like, visit someone?
The iconography
it's red.
Was cool, but I don't know. Speaking in tongues would freak me out. And I'm a Gemini, so I do it
Yeah, that's saying a lot. So, yeah, what's Brian's big 3?
Okay, Brian was born on February 17th, 1954 in Auckland, New Zealand, and we don't know what time. So we don't know his rising, but we know he's an Aquarius sun and a Leo moon. And so the sun is in detriment in Aquarius because the sun is about our individual human spirit, and Aquarius is the sign of the masses. The sun rules Leo, which is a sign fully contained within the summer season, and Aquarius season occurs in the dead of winter. So it kind of gives you an idea about why the sun isn't always great there or doesn't feel comfortable. Doesn't make him a bad person. But Aquarius suns are like concerned with their place among the crowd or the group and distinguishing themselves. And it's like pretty fitting for a preacher, you know, who like deals with a group. Leo moons require external validation as like their basic human need. Leo's the hype man of the zodiac, and the moon is like what we need to feel safe and secure in life. And Leo and Aquarius are opposite signs, and when the sun and the moon are in opposite signs, it's a full moon, and full moons are all about like awareness in human relationships, which I think would be good for a pastor, maybe. And the Leo full moon every year is like an interesting one because it's ruled by the sun in detriment. So it's kind of like a beacon of hope that occurs in the middle of winter. So maybe he thinks, like maybe he feels a little like that light, that spark in winter or something.
Honestly, this chart is like big pastor energy.
Yeah. Big pastor energy. Eventually, Brian gets older and, he meets his wife. They move to Sydney, and just like his chart might suggest, he becomes an assistant pastor to his dad, who at this point had his own Pentecostal megachurch himself. And Brian's like, this is great, but I think we need to update this vibe for the current decade. So he starts an offshoot of that church, and that's what becomes Hillsong. So what was happening when Hillsong was founded?
Okay, so Hillsong was founded in 1983, according to religion.fandom.com /wiki/Hillsong Church.
Reputable website.
They said it was formed in August in Sydney, Australia. And so since we don't have the exact date, I looked at the whole month of August 1983. And Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and the South Node were all in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the sign of religion and beliefs and preaching from our soapbox. Sagittarius is very fun, and a lot has to do with being a full-on fanatic, speaking in tongues perhaps. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and Jupiter is faith, belief, hope, idealization, and reparation or integration, like a church. Uranus is shock, surprise, or extremism. Neptune is transcendence, deception, or dissolution. Jupiter and Neptune especially speak to religious or transcendent experiences, as well as fanaticism and complete or utter delusion. I guess kind of what we need for religion or stuff. Or love. But yeah, finally the South Node is an eclipse point, and it points to what's comfortable in a society and often what cultural conventions are being reviewed or reformed, changed maybe. So that's kind of what he did with his dad's church, right? He wanted to update the church. And then in a larger cultural context, it coincided with the Satanic Panic. But yeah, so
interesting.
In August 1983, Venus stationed retrograde in Virgo square the Sagittarius stellium that I just talked about. And Venus retrograde is a time for reviewing values and love. Virgo is a sign of the Virgin, and so it represents purity. Virgos are intelligent, observant, obsessive, and obsessive about achieving perfection. And so when it's square the Sag stellium, it would be this feeling of compulsion to purify your beliefs and values. Since Venus is involved, Venus is also money, so perhaps it could have been an opportunity to capitalize on religion. And I mean, that's kind of a hot take, but also Venus retrograded back into Leo, where it is all about loving yourself and individual values, which could also be about making your own money. I don't even know if you said that it was a for-profit church or not. I just kind of assume it is because Carl Lentz had a Saint Laurent jacket. So finally, though, in 1983, in August 1983, Saturn entered Scorpio. So it started the month in Libra and entered Scorpio by the end of the month. This was also big Satanic Panic vibes. Saturn is restriction, rules, discipline, and starvation. And Scorpio is the depths of despair. So Saturn and Scorpio can relate to shame and wanting to purify the culture or the individual, depending on who's trying.
That probably had a lot of people running to church.
Also, I think this is interesting too, just of the Venus retrograde in Virgo square, all that Sag stuff, because to me, that's really reviewing your values, but also when it comes to your day, Virgo to me is very daily duties, the stuff that you have to do every day. And this church very much its goal was to be able to be Christian in your daily life and almost not let it fuck with the secular world. Because, when you think of someone that speaks in tongues, you're oh, that person's probably a freak. But this church, they wanted you to be oh, I could go do my speaking in tongues thing, but still be cool about it and still live my life like a normal person in society.
Very concerned with being cool. Interesting.
Speaking in tongues, yet cool. Got it.
Speaking in tongues, but make it fashion.
But yeah, I mean, Hillsong really sought out to modernize the church. They really wanted to take the whole Pentecostal thing and make it less polarizing to outside society. So today they're known for their like younger, charismatic Pentecostal ministers, which GQ once referred to as hype priests.
Christ on a
and
cross.
their very upbeat sermons. They even have their own app. But the thing that really differentiates the megachurch and makes them popular is their music.
Yes, they're very much into music in church services, but you know, it's not like your normal old, like, kind of, we go to Catholic church, at least we were raised Catholic, so, you know, it's not that, like, sad, droll, kind of like...
And I will raise you up on eagle's wings.
This is
Have you heard that one? That's a funeral song, but honestly... Catholics, like, music is so bad that used to be my favorite song. Like, I was excited when I heard Eagle's Wings because even though that meant that someone probably died, I was like, oh, at least it's a song that's, like, kind of fun.
Yeah, that's, okay.
I like the Lord of the Dance.
Yeah.
Dance for the scribes.
Oh, that was a good one.
That was like a closer.
They would not dance and they wouldn't follow me. Dance for the fishermen, for James and for John.
That's when you know it's lit.
The dance went on,
When you finish, when church closes out with that, you're like, it's going to be, we're going out to lunch
shot
now.
of church,
So it was not like that at all. The music at Hillsong is like a pop concert. This one GQ writer that did a profile on Hillsong described the songs as like Selena Gomez grade ballads, just with like Christian lyrics. So, you know, imagine like Love You Like a Love Song, but only instead of those lyrics, it would be like My Savior on that cursed tree, or The Furious Love laid waste to my sin.
It's so hard to imagine.
Honestly, you know, sometimes when you're like on a road trip and you're like trying to like tune to like stations, and then you like hear something that sounds pretty good, and then you realize you've accidentally stumbled across a Christian station, and you're like, they tricked me.
There was
yeah.
But honestly, I mean, some of that shit is a bop. And like in Hillsong's case, their music is so well done that they've literally won Grammys. They're platinum selling. One of their singles hit almost 1 million streams in its first week. And all of this really attracts like young churchgoers. And today their sermons are broadcast around the globe to 50 million people in 60 languages, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
Besides the whole music thing, Hillsong is especially known for its celebrity following. So, you know, you've got Chris Pratt, Vanessa Hudgens, Kylie and Kendall Jenner, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Selena Gomez, Haley Baldwin, and even Bono.
What the fuck?
Haven't seen, if I saw Bono at Hillsong, I'd be like, I really gotta check.
I just have to say there's a few flat earthers in that group that Sarah just mentioned. So take that with a grain of salt.
So the celebrity thing, even including the flat earthers, is what put this church on the map. But the celebrity that honestly like was their shot to fame was Justin Bieber.
Baby boy.
Yep, Biebs. And let's go all the way back to 2014, right? Justin Bieber was not the same Bieber he is in 2022. This was his year of like really acting a fool. And it started with him like egging his neighbor's house for some reason, which he was later charged with misdemeanor vandalism. He got a DUI in Miami Beach, was charged with resisting arrest. He got a bunch of tattoos. He was charged with assault a bunch of times after getting into fights with a limo driver, a fan, various photographers, even Orlando Bloom. Though a lot of the charges were later dropped, this was a really bad press year for him.
I mean, to be fair, I would also fight Orlando Bloom.
Yeah,
like someone who's like easy to fight.
Oh, for sure.
But regardless, Justin was like a real wreck to the point that there was a petition to send him back to Canada, which I forgot about, but then remembered when I saw that. And, you know, just because we're here, Justin is hijacking this podcast for a second. What was going on his chart at this time in 2014?
It was a pleasure to look at this as someone who has terminal Bieber fever. So Bieber's in a 9th house year in annual perfections, and he has Cancer on his 9th house. Cancer is ruled by the moon, so the moon is his time lord. And the 9th house is all about spirituality and religion, and like this is a year to get saved. In his solar return chart, Jupiter is conjunct his progressed moon in Cancer and his activated 9th house. Wow, so much Jupiter in this episode about religion. So the progressed moon is like someone's chart, or the progressed moon in someone's chart will indicate the focal point of like their emotional development at that period of time. The sign it's in indicates like the agenda or the mood and like how their needs might be shifting. And the house it's in will be like the area of life where the events are unfolding. And so this could be especially significant since the moon was his time lord that year. And like I've been saying, Jupiter is the planet of faith and salvation. And so when it's on his progressed moon, it's showing like where his belief is shifting to accommodate his changing needs. And Saturn was in Scorpio in his first house from October 2012 through December 2014. And it also crossed his like natal Jupiter. Actually, he has a whole first house stellium, Jupiter, the North Node, Pluto, and his ascendant. But yeah, so it crossed all these planets. But also, so it crosses natal Jupiter. That's a dual Jupiter activation. And when Saturn transits your first house, it's like an era that forces you to mature and take responsibility for your actions. If you're lucky, and if you're unlucky, it could also be a time maybe when you're like punished or shunned from your community or society, or, you know, slammed in the tabloids if you're famous. Also, this was during his Chiron opposition. And so Chiron is like the comet that is the wound that never heals, or that can like really only be healed through relationship and like healing others. And the opposition is an aspect of like awareness. So this is probably a time where Justin like realized that he wasn't always going to be like the golden boy. He wasn't always going to be a child, even though he kind of like never really had a childhood. I feel like he was probably just dealing with a bunch of all that shit, right? And so I'm really sad for how hard this must have been for him, but I'm proud for how he handled it and how far he's come.
Wow.
That's my 2 cents.
Also, too, I feel like with Jupiter, like, it obviously expands everything it touches. So besides religion, that's probably also why he was just being like a complete another maniac that year.
Yeah, and it's trining his natal Jupiter, and he has all these Pisces, so he's very water. And so with that Cancer, it's like pulling in the 3rd water sign. He doesn't have any Cancer in his natal chart. So it could just be like water chaos, right?
Yeah.
Feelings, no logic.
One of the things I read about, one of the things that he did was he was smoking so much weed on his private plane with his dad that the pilots had to wear gas masks. But anyway, the reason why all of this is so important is because this year, 2014, was how Justin met one of Hillsong's eventually most famous pastors, Carl Lentz. And this meeting was what catapulted the Hillsong Church to fame in the U.S.
Yes. So a little bit about Carl Lentz. He's a dad, husband, and spoiler alert, former celebrity pastor. He's known for his look, which is tattoos, hipster glasses, designer clothes, and for having a huge Instagram following. Before he was a regular on TMZ, profiled by GQ, interviewed by Oprah, and seen on Kourtney Kardashian's Instagram, he was just a regular dude from Virginia that like dropped out of college and eventually ended up in Australia studying theology. And this is where he met Hillsong founder Brian Houston and got in touch with that church family. So then Carl was eventually asked to help open a Hillsong location in New York. So before we get more into him and his bromance with Biebs, what is Carl's big 3?
Okay, so Carl Lentz was born on November 6, 1978 in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and we don't know what time. But we do know that he has a Scorpio sun and either a Capricorn or Aquarius moon. The moon like changed signs late in the morning. So Scorpio suns are mysterious, dark, and like acquainted with human suffering, and they exploit this. We all know. The sun is the spirit, and Scorpio is like the guts or like the body, the roots of the earth. Scorpio is a water sign, which means it operates on intuition, and Scorpios channel that intuition like through their gut feeling. So they're always acting like not just on like instinct of like the mind, it's like through their body in that way. And if his moon is in Capricorn, then like he might be reticent to indulge in his deep emotions, which could lead someone to the church. The moon's in detriment in Capricorn, which means it operates like against its nature somewhat. And it could be denying like your needs in order to get a task done on a day, but in like your natal chart, that's your whole life. So if his moon's in Aquarius, though, it's still not going to indulge his every emotion, but it'll have like a more detached point of view and like maybe be a bit more friendly and a bit more like human oriented.
Despite being a freak, he was super charismatic. So he was just living his best like Christian life when one day he gets a call from someone saying that, you know, they're like, yo, Carl, like we have someone, it's this young kid who's struggling and like you really need to help him. And Carl's like, okay, I am a man of Christ, so sure. And that young kid happens to be Justin Bieber. So they talk, and Justin's allegedly like, hey, like, I really need to be baptized. I need to know Jesus. So I'm still not sure why, but besides like probably being a flex, Carl baptized Justin Bieber in NBA star Tyson Chandler's bathtub.
I can't.
And from that moment on, Justin apparently rededicated his life to Christ, and Carl and him became super close. So close that Justin even lived with Carl, which is weird.
That is weird. But yeah, Justin and Carl were often seen out together, and people said their relationship was intense. Others said Carl was very influential on Justin and helped make many of his life decisions. In fact, some people say that Carl was the one who told him to abruptly cancel his Purpose tour, but Carl denies saying that Justin should cancel it. Regardless of what happened, they obviously have a very interesting relationship. So what is their bi-wheel like?
And let us all recall that a bi-wheel helps us look at the synastry between two people. So we take each of the charts we have, we overlap them, and from that we could see similarities and relationship dynamics.
Okay, there is a lot going on in this chart. So Carl's Saturn and North Node are in Virgo, and this is conjunct Justin's midheaven and Chiron. And Saturn is a planet of maturity and can relate to like father figures in one's life. And the North Node will add some sort of like magnetic direction to this. The nodes feel like magnetic in terms of synastry, whether it's romantic or not. Chiron is the wound that needs like help from others in order to heal. And the midheaven is the public self and social status. And it's especially significant when like you're looking at a famous person's chart. So this combination sort of shows how the relationship with Carl changed how Justin behaved in public, which ultimately transformed the public's perception of him for the better. And it seems like a good aspect convo for like fostering trust. Justin might have also felt like Carl was like the father figure he didn't really have. Like Jeremy was like renting Lambos with him and like, you know, what is it called? Drag racing in Miami.
Hotboxing private jets.
Hotboxing private jets.
He did refer to him as his second father.
Well, so there you go.
Interesting.
And Carl's Saturn in Virgo is opposite Bieber's Saturn in Pisces. And so the Saturn opposition is like an interesting aspect between two people, especially in Virgo and Pisces. Virgo is service and purity, and Pisces is like salvation and healing. And again, this is going to relate to like maturity and responsibility since we're talking about Saturn. So like maybe they would butt heads about some things, but ultimately I feel like they probably both helped each other grow, at least at that point in time. And Justin, obviously, I think, I mean, for the better in the long run. I don't really know him personally, so I'm just, you know, whatever. Carl's natal Venus retrograde is conjunct Uranus, which is conjunct Justin's natal Jupiter, and like Justin has a whole first house Scorpio stellium. And so Venus retrograde in Scorpio is like really kind of about like breaking all of your bones in order to heal again. You know, when they do that, like to set the bones, it's just like pain. You're like going through all of your pain in order to heal and like think about your values. Venus in Scorpio often like signifies trust issues and like could really be a difficulty relating to other people, which is true in like some extent for all Scorpio placements. Uranus is shock and detours, and Jupiter is faith. So this could have been like an instantaneous phenomenon for bonding with one another. Also like maybe one of those friendships that I feel like we've all had where like you're instantly friends with that person, you know, it's like, oh, we're best friends now, or you've at least known someone who does that. But like maybe they both felt understood for once, and like maybe it just felt like Carl, like meeting Carl for Justin might have like triggered his readiness to change.
After being seen with Justin so often, Carl started to hang out in celebrity circles and even became somewhat of a celebrity himself. But not everyone was super happy about that. A lot of the congregants said that Carl was pretty detached from the church. He wasn't around that much. When he was, people said he would go out of his way to like hyper focus on the fashion he was wearing and only talk to you if you were considered cool, aka a celebrity.
Ew.
I know. So gross. I was like trying to look at his chart to be like, where's that like fuckboy energy coming from?
He has Jupiter in Leo square Venus and Uranus in Scorpio. He loves his cum gutters and wants to wear low-rise pants every day.
Ew, I hate that.
Sorry.
But that does make sense. I also think it's interesting too about Venus and Scorpio because not like that he was like super goth, but he had like those tattoos and, you know, stuff like that. Like was known for like the way he dressed. So there at his church, people were getting annoyed because there was reserved seating for VIPs at the front of the church as if it was like a weird club.
There are like parables against that.
I know. And volunteers of the church were just starting to get super annoyed because, you know, the church depends on volunteers to get a lot of their work done. But people said the culture was just like Capricorn on steroids, like working 12-hour days and being treated like shit. And also, ordinary congregants felt that Carl was just really swept up in catering to famous people. And, you know, the church was just becoming superficial, which is like the opposite of what it was supposed to be. So all of this is kind of like boiling up to the surface when all of a sudden news breaks that Carl had been cheating on his wife of 17 years.
Oops.
But yeah, a staff member found sexts on Carl's work computer because in classic Gen X fashion, he didn't know how the iCloud works. The messages were between Carl and Ranin Karim, a jewelry designer from Brooklyn. And Ranin said she'd been seeing Carl for a few months when the texts were discovered.
So quickly after this scalding hot tea was spilled, Carl was fired, and then he later admitted to cheating, and he also said he had engaged in like more than one affair and was also kind of having an affair at the same time.
Jesus Christ.
I know, which yikes. But Brian Houston, aka like the head guy of the church, fired Carl for what he called moral failures and breaches in trust.
Yeah. Sounds like it. But critics of Hillsong argue that Carl was allowed to be on his bullshit for so long and that Brian Houston turned a blind eye because Carl was bringing all of this celebrity and media attention, which, you know, is good for the church and probably led to some big bucks. But Houston denies all of that. He said that firing Carl was the end of a long road of frustration he had been experiencing with the former pastor. So what was going on when Carl was finally fired from Hillsong?
Okay, so that was on November 4th, 2020 in New York. On October 31st, there was a full moon in Taurus exactly conjunct Uranus. Full moons bring awareness and illumination, and Uranus is shocking news or behavior. And since the full moon is like when the sun is opposite the moon, the sun was also opposite Uranus. And regular listeners know that Uranus oppositions frequently show up in our breaking news charts. And this happened 2 days before Carl's birthday, so the sun was almost exactly conjunct his natal sun, aka his solar return, as well as his natal Venus retrograde and Uranus in Scorpio. So now we have like dual Uranus activation. It could be like shining a light on his shocking behavior, as well as shocking behavior in general, and just like exposing his filth. And then even more insane is that it's during Carl's Uranus opposition. So the ultimate expose is like your own Uranus opposition, I guess. It's just like exposing the truth, which is, you know, jarring or surprising. And it just like totally blew Carl's cover. And I guess Scorpio and Taurus is the axis of sex. So, you know, it's not surprising, I guess, that it's a sex scandal.
Ooh,
wow,
interesting.
So literal.
I know. I was like, I bet Uranus is going to be in this chart because it was sudden, or at least sudden to the public. But after Carl was fired, other women came forward. Is it surprise? Probably not, to say that he was just like a real dipshit. And one of these women was a woman named Leona Kimes. Leona is currently a Hillsong pastor in Boston, but before that, she had worked for the Lentz family as a nanny. And she wrote an essay for Medium that kind of like aired all of Carl's dirty laundry. She said that Carl had sexually abused her and just had been really creepy to her and overly flirtatious. But, you know, Carl basically kind of threatened her and said that, you know, if she ever came forward and his reputation was ruined, he would ruin hers too.
Just like a man of God would.
But the scandals didn't just stop with Carl. Hillsong is just really having a moment when it comes to controversies. One of their London preachers was moved out of a high leadership role after he made some dismissive comments about the murder of George Floyd. Asshole. A letter to New York leadership surfaced saying volunteers were being severely overworked. There were several instances of intolerance of LGBTQI plus people and plenty of shady financial dealings. One pastor even lied about having cancer. for some reason, and he was caught.
A lot of pathology in this.
Woo! Yikes.
Yes. That last one is like the weirdest.
That is the weirdest one.
But not even founder Brian Houston could escape the scandals. Brian recently had to step down for the rest of the year after being charged with not alerting authorities about his father's sexual abuse crimes. So allegedly his father, who is now dead, sexually assaulted a kid in 1970. And the police are saying that Brian knew about it and never reported it. So now he has a 3-week hearing back in Australia where they're basically going to argue that he withheld information that could have helped prosecute his father. So,
wow.
Yikes.
Ooh. Major yikes. But yeah, so Hillsong definitely has not had an easy few years. So generally, Dana, like, what are going on with their transits?
Well, the one major one, which is huge, is that Hillsong just wrapped its nodal return, which lasted from May 2020 through January 2022. And if you're a new listener, the nodes are eclipse points, and whatever signs they're in are the signs where the eclipses will occur in that year or like over those years. So eclipses are like a huge deal. One of the main predictive techniques in astrology. Eclipses are like wormholes. It's like Donnie Darko energy. It's just like sudden shifts in your life where you're like taken on one timeline to another. People come into your life, people come out. The nodal return occurs every 19 years and reflects major life changes. One example we have is when Ben Affleck and J-Lo started dating again. It was their first nodal return since their relationship. Anyway, though.
So many nodal returns.
Yeah, right?
This season. Last season, too.
Fated events occur that were like always going to happen when the nodes aren't like involved with each other. So what is also interesting, though, is that the year Hillsong was founded, there was a solar eclipse at 19 degrees Gemini and 11 degrees Sagittarius, and then a lunar eclipse in Gemini at 27 degrees. And in 2021, we had almost like the exact mirroring lunations. The solar eclipse in Sagittarius was at 12 instead of 11 degrees. And the Gemini at 27 was a full moon instead of an eclipse, but it ended that season. Weird. So it's just sort of like interesting that these degrees line up. It doesn't always happen like that for nodal returns or nodal oppositions. Also, though, Hillsong has Saturn and Pluto conjunct in Libra. And in 2020, Saturn and Pluto were both in Capricorn, forming a square aspect to Hillsong's Libra placements. And so Saturn and Libra are like the planets of like power and like often endings. And Ortley uses the Saturn-Pluto midpoint as like the death point. And so Libra is a sign of relationships. It's all about like harmony and coming together. And Capricorn is about structures. And Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn was a time when all of our structures came crashing down. So this is just like pretty apt.
Very apt. If you had a structure, it came crashing down.
If you had one.
If you had one.
There are no structures left in the world. Obviously, that's not true, unfortunately. But, well, yeah. Overall, Hillsong, megachurches, you know, when you open those closed doors, you're going to find some shit. Though we were upset that it wasn't like a cult, we have to admit.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it'll unravel more.
It was more like fuckboy energy than the cult leader energy I was hoping for.
Male low-rise khakis.
We were hoping for some, but we'll have to wait for the Vow season 2 to get more cult vibes in our life.
Yes,
cult vibes.
Please.
Cult vibes. But next week, we're talking about another shady-ass character, and that is Simon Levive, a.k.a. the Tinder Swindler.
Yes!
Can't wait for that.
Bitch.
That bitch.
Very excited. And with that, I'm Elise.
I'm Dana.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is Allegedly Astrology.